I think some of you have met me before when I last ventured out of the ivory tower to attempt to deal with our current political crisis. I'm sorry. I think many of you saw me in 2018 when I left the University of Georgia, where I've been teaching since '82, as a philosophy professor, and I entered the race for Congress in our 10th congressional district. And that itself is somewhat of a quixotic enterprise because of the severe gerrymandering that any candidate faces, where the district is drawn in such a way that 2/3 of the voters lean in a Republican direction. Also, it's a media desert. There's virtually no free press coverage that will deal with local candidates. And on top of that, it's extremely hard to get the resources from either within or without that will enable you to make your existence known, let alone to let people know what you stand for more than a small fraction of the voters. And that, alas, I think, determined the outcome in a way that many people found very surprising. In the primary, the outcome of the general election was a surprise to no one, I think. Now you might ask, why, having experienced that, am I now taking on a race that is 15 times bigger, that is facing, among other candidates, a new Republican incumbent who has boldly announced she intends to buy the election by putting $20 million of her own money into it? Well, I'm running really for the same reasons I ran the first time. I think we are now inching towards a precipice where the entire fabric of our democracy is in danger. Donald Trump may be the agent of that demise if he is able to succeed in gathering the power he wishes to have. But I think all of this reflects our failure as a nation, both as Republicans and as Democrats, to really recognize and fulfill the social rights, without which we can't take care of our families, we can't have sufficient social opportunity to be able to engage in self-government. And I am here to bring the fight to Washington to fulfill these social rights and make America righteous in the genuine sense of not just being a great power, but of actually ensuring that all the members of our society have the opportunities they need to genuinely be free citizens of a republic and pursue happiness as it deserves to be pursued. Now, I have a campaign website, winfieldforsenate.com, which spells out in detail the various policies that are directed to the specific social rights that are not mentioned in our Constitution and that have been ignored by both parties in varying degrees. These involve the rights to a job at a just wage, the right to fair employee empowerment, the right to balance work and family, the right to have decent housing, the right to have decent access to education at all levels, the right to medical care, the right to a healthy environment, the right to legal representation in all cases, both criminal and civil. But what I want to focus on tonight is the right and the way it can be fulfilled. It is in a way the foundation of the others, and then the right that represents the capstone of all the others. I'm referring in the first instance to the right that really represents the basis of economic independence and security, the right to a job at a just wage. And the other right I have in mind is the right to legal care. Now, the right to a job might appear to be something particular, addressed to a certain sector of the population, namely those who are employees, who make up 95% of breadwinners, but are not everyone. But I think we all recognize that if you are among the few who ply your trade as an entrepreneur or landlord, if you do not succeed, you are then having to rely upon what we all have as a basis of livelihood once slavery is abolished, namely ownership of our own labor power. And for that reason, dealing with the market's endemic failure to provide full employment. A federal job guarantee represents a measure that provides the rock bottom of economic independence and security. And it's transformative both for those who are searching for work without success or have part-time employment when they need full-time employment, but it's transformative for those of us who do have employment. It is transformative for those who are searching for work because it allows us to put an end, for example, to the school-to-prison pipeline, to mass incarceration, in the sense that everyone will know that they can have a decent living, they will be able to have a job that can serve their community, and a federal job guarantee puts people to work not in providing jobs and services and goods and services that compete with the private sector, but doing things that are not being attended to that we need, such as dealing with our failing infrastructure, helping to make a transition to green energy, providing all the services that are lacking in our schools, in our healthcare system, in elder care, in child care, in the provision of the arts of all sorts to our population, providing public transportation, providing broadband service to all. The job guarantee can put millions to work serving our communities. But at the same time, it lifts the fear of firing from everyone else, which means we can stand up to defend our rights. And we also, in a situation of full employment with maximum consumer demand, we escape the great highs and lows of business cycles. We are able, in a sense, to fight more effectively for decent jobs, decent working conditions, decent salaries and the like. But what I want to point out today is how fundamental the elimination of unemployment and the elimination of poverty wages is to addressing three major problems we face. One is how we can deal with our climate emergency. Because I think it's becoming apparent to us all that we need to start thinking of not 2050, but 2030 as a deadline for putting an end to fossil fuel consumption and production. And this obviously is going to involve people losing their employment in the fossil fuel industries, in the production of appliances and vehicles and so forth that are not going to be usable without fossil fuels. But we can deal with that issue with a federal job guarantee, where everyone in those industries knows that they will have a job awaiting for them. And this is something that not only deals with, we could say, the basic ethical problem of ensuring that no one is going to be without a livelihood as we make this transition. We also have to think of it as an international endeavor, because we not only have to put an end to fossil fuel consumption and production here in America, we have to do it throughout the world. And that too poses the problem of ensuring that nations can reinvent themselves and provide employment to all their residents. And that is something that we have to think of as a major goal of our foreign policy. Now, we also face, obviously, an immigration problem, as do all developed nations in face of growing economic and political refugees. And there is actually a legitimate worry on the part of some sectors of our population, and those in other developed nations, that their economic livelihood is being endangered by the huge influx of undocumented people. Well, the undocumented deserve to become documented, deserve to become legal residents who can now pursue a life out of the shadows. But we can make that something that will not in any way endanger the livelihood of anyone else and in any way depress wages if we have a federal job guarantee tied to just wages and measures for genuine employee empowerment. And in that way, we can also, put the brakes on that growing economic anxiety and insecurity of some that has been fueling the rise of an anti-democratic nationalism, which, after all, is in a way a resurgent fascism that we see growing in many other parts of the world and here having, to some degree, a foot in our own White House. Now, another measure that I think it's important to see the connection to a federal job guarantee is genuine reproductive freedom. Because reproductive freedom is not only a matter of having the right to an abortion, it's also a matter of not being unable to have the children one wants because one doesn't have the resources to take care of them. Now, obviously, a single-payer health care system can and should provide for free abortions for those who need them, for free contraceptives, day-after pills, pregnancy screening, and in that way can reduce to a humanly possible minimum unwanted pregnancies. But we also have to ensure that all prospective parents know that they will benefit from a fundamental basic economic independence that will allow them to have the children they want. A key part of that is a federal job guarantee. Now, I want to now switch to the capstone of what's involved in all of our rights, and that is that we actually have fair access to legal representation. Now, the Sixth Amendment to our Constitution guarantees us all criminal representation, but we all know the way it's handled, it does not provide us all with an equal degree of quality representation. On average, clients of legal aid lawyers see their lawyer for about an hour. 95% of criminal cases are settled by plea bargaining, which is in a way the highway to mass incarceration, where people do not have a chance to have their cases really examined in court. And when you deal with the civil side, 85% of individuals who are involved in civil cases, which are just as important, dealing with the most important matters of family life, work, discrimination, sexual harassment, well, 85% of those people who are caught up in these cases have no legal representation. Now, I have to admire, in a sense, the work that Janet has been doing for many years. I know of it in a way from the inside because my wife worked at her law firm. You know, she's doing a work defending employees who are being taken advantage of by their employers. They do not have any guaranteed legal representation. And as a result, she's dealing with clients who don't have that much money, to say the least, and she has to work on a contingency basis. And it's not that easy to win cases. It's not very easy for her to survive as a lawyer defending people in civil cases, nor is it very easy for we citizens to uphold our rights given this situation. So we need to have what I'm calling the legal care for all policy, which you can think of as the legal analog of a Medicare for all policy. Just as in a Medicare for all policy, you go to any doctor you want, you get comparable service to anyone else, and ideally there should be no copays, no deductibles, and the cost will be entirely borne by a public subsidy that can be supported by fair taxation. In the same way, we can afford everyone in both criminal and civil cases access to any lawyer they want. The legal fees can be negotiated on a national basis, just as medical fees can be in a single-payer system. And in this way, no one will be without their dream team in defending themselves both in criminal cases and in civil cases. The Me Too movement is something that cannot be, in a sense, a movement that can effectively deal with sexual harassment on the job for two reasons. One is the fear of firing, because people are worried about losing their jobs if they speak up. And in America, where we don't yet have Medicare for all, if you lose your job, you lose your health care. And you also lose what could be said to be the only viable kind of pension you'll end up, since Social Security payments for retirement, as well as disability, are at an extreme poverty rate. So in a certain respect, guaranteed jobs at fair wages removes the fear of firing. But on the other hand, if we have legal care for all, then everyone will know they can stand up to fight sexual harassment on the job, racial discrimination on the job, employer abuse, etc., and know that they have access to the legal care they all have. In this way, all of our rights can be protected by creating a situation where we are genuinely all equal before the law. Now, I haven't discussed with you the policies that are needed to deal with our other social rights, but I want you to consider these two poles of the whole social rights agenda: the basis of economic independence and security, the fulfillment of the true right to work, and then on the other hand, the fulfillment of our ability to make use of the courts to defend our rights. Together, this gives us, in a way, a new birth of freedom. And I hope you will join me in November in making history together and unchain our democracy and make America genuinely righteous. Go see my campaign website, winfieldforsenate.com. I do need donations. I will be facing someone who's putting $20 million into the race. I will say this about the race and why I'm not a lunatic in entering it. And that is, despite the fact that it's much more gargantuan than running for U.S. House of Representatives, there are several distinct advantages. First of all, there is no gerrymandering to contend with. And as the race for governor of Stacey Abrams showed us, even with voter suppression, the numbers of voters who get through to the polls who are Democrats is now on a par, maybe even more, than Republicans. Secondly, one does not face a media desert in running for a statewide office. And particularly for this office. We all know that the Senate races are going to determine control of the Senate. And whoever we may elect for president will not be able to do anything unless we have proper control of the Senate. So this is a crucial race. It is going to gain immense attention, not just statewide, but in the national news. And that will allow, I think, even outsiders like myself to be able to get myself heard, my program heard, without having to have the $20 million of personal wealth to throw into the race. So I hope you will look at what I'm standing for. I hope you will pitch in and become volunteers in the campaign as it develops itself. So, thank you.
You might have questions?
Yeah, I'd like to take any questions you have, because I think we need to discuss the issues. And I know from my experience as a candidate, going to many, many different Democratic county meetings, that there is very little discussion about the issues, very little questioning of candidates who often are allowed to get by talking primarily about themselves, saying very little about what they stand for, not having to face any questioning. Yep.
In getting near the end of reading Rachel Maddow's Blowout at the moment, and I'm just appalled